This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Veronica. Thanks so much for reading that letter. Just tonight, I had a conversation with a young man, and I was explaining the triangle and our AA symbol, unity, fellowship, or unity, recovery, and service. And I was explaining to him the unity piece is that I could go to Florida and go to an AA meeting and immediately have fellowship, and I could go to Arizona and I could go to California and find fellowship with people I had never met before. And the really cool thing is I left that conversation with him in New Jersey where I am, and then I log in, I'm in all these places all at one time. And I just see all your faces, and I'm not in California or Florida or wherever you may be. And so tonight, our lead share is Brian. Brian and I, we've never met in person, but I feel connected to Brian because of a mutual connection. And tonight, I'm just so grateful for this meeting that we are everywhere all at once through the spirit of our fellowship. So I want to welcome Brian F. tonight, coming from North California, to be our share. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you. And it's good to be with you guys too, man. I love seeing where people are from. I'm an alcoholic named Brian, and apparently Juanita gave you my name and said that somehow I'd be a fit for this. I got to say, after listening to the essay, I don't know how qualified I am to speak on emotional sobriety. And I find myself asking, holy smokes, man, am I in the wrong spot? But obviously Juanita heard something that she thought this would be a fit for me. And I say yes. I apologize, Chris, for having to change the dates on us on this deal. But it's good to have a life that is flexible and busy, and I have commitments that I get to show up for. So thanks for your tolerance and patience. Emotional sobriety. Well, first of all, let me get into, I'm an alcoholic who came from a family of, I can clearly see the genetic predisposition to alcoholism. I believe in the biological theory of AA, and I'm built differently than my wife, who's an average tempered drinker that our book talks about. She's hardwired differently than I am. I believe that, and I can see it in my family tree. I can see it in my lineage at any family function. And there's a few of us that are participating and a bunch of us that aren't, and it's very obvious to me. So I can see some of the immediate, benefits of the program in emotional sobriety right there at any family function, and that I'm not participating in that way any longer. It's a different show up for me, a different accountability for me, a different representation for me today. But in my alcoholism as a young boy, I turned to alcohol as a young boy, essentially because I had a bad sense of self-esteem. I had this less than thing going on with me. My dad was a police officer in San Francisco, whose dad was a police officer in San Francisco, his brother, this whole lineage of cops, priests, and criminals, Irish Catholic, San Francisco, old neighborhood deal. And they had a limb on the family tree for me. And it wasn't as a cop and it wasn't as a priest, but as a criminal, I fit. I had a spot that I fit in with the disease of alcoholism and the very skewed perception of God through, our family teachings. I've got to say the Catholic institution is an incredible institution. I'm a fan. However, my perception of God as a young boy came from some very dark places that had me feeling like God did not have a place for me, that I was damaged goods. I heard I was a sinner an awful lot as a boy. My mother, when she would sling the names of the saints, I knew I was in trouble. And when she'd say Brian, Peter, Fowley, for the love of Mike, or Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, I knew that I was in some deep stuff, And so I heard a lot that I was a sinner. So it was very easy for me as a young boy to feel like, what's the point? I'm a sinner. I'm already damaged goods. I'm done. So I didn't have a good relationship with what I would say a loving God of my understanding. I had a relationship with a condemning God of not my understanding, but one that was pushed on me. And when I turned to alcohol to sip off my grandfather's highball. I used to hit the half-empty cocktails that were left on the living room table as my family migrated to the dining room for dinner, and I would take the drinks, and man, I felt different immediately. I felt like I fit. I felt like I could talk. I felt like I had something to say, and y'all wanted to listen to me. It was a self-esteem change for me. It was an instant head change that burned going down, and I felt good. So for me, I learned a couple things at home at a young age. Violence was one of them, that violence was a solution, and that alcohol was a solution. And I left home at 14 years old with a terrible sense of self, and I never went back home. I went to the streets. I left that middle-class family out of San Francisco in the Bay Area to the streets, and I took the coping skill of, getting loaded, drinking, changed the way I felt, and was a solution to my lack of control. And violence was also changed the way I felt instantly, and was a change for that lack of control. It made me feel like I was in control. And my disease progressed quickly on the streets as a kid. And I got to tell you, other substances, huge part of my story, but I'm an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic that I heard an old timer describe to me that other substances were like condiments to his disease of alcoholism. Like, I'm there for the hot dog, but the mustard, the relish, it laces it up. So condiments or other substances always were an additive factor to my disease of alcoholism, of drinking. And so I progressed quickly, and it wasn't long before I was in contact with law enforcement, getting in trouble. It was kind of the way I just thought that I was built to be in trouble. And by the time I was 21 years old, I was packing pistols to solve problems. And I used a pistol to solve a problem, which was an ego problem. When we talk about emotional sobriety, my mental capacity at the age of 21 was probably that of a 14, 13-year-old boy who couldn't solve any kind of conflict in a rational, thoughtful, contemplative way. I was reactionary, I was emotional, and I was violent. And I used a pistol to change the way I felt. And I shot a man named Jim, and I killed him. And I need you all to hear that I lied in court. As soon as they arrested me, I lied and said I didn't kill nobody. Now, I had been a liar ever since I took my first drink. And my dad would ask me, what the F's wrong with you? What have you been doing? I lied immediately. I could not tell the truth. And lying was such a natural part of who I was that it was only natural to lie to the cops when they arrested me. And then I lied and blamed my victim for why I killed him. I said it was self-defense, and it was not self-defense. I was offensive in every aspect of my life once I started drinking and doing other substances. And I want you to know that when I killed Jim, although I had a lot of other issues going on, bottom line of that, the root cause was that I was solving an ego problem. I had an ego problem. I was showing him who he was effing with, and that I wasn't the guy, and I killed him, man. And I went through a jury trial, was convicted of second-degree murder here in California, and I was sentenced at the age of 21 to 17 years to life in state prison. When I was in my county jail going through a murder trial, I learned how to make Pruno, prison-made wine, and I continued my disease. I kept feeding because I could not wrap my brain or my heart around who I had become. I learned in recovery the difference between guilt and shame. And it was a very important moment for me to learn that in recovery many years later. But that guilt was over something that I did. Like, I knew I was guilty. You get what I'm saying? Like, clear as day, man. There's no doubt that I'm guilty. But the shame factor was over how I had become a man who was capable of killing another man to solve a problem. Do you get what I'm saying? The shame of the human being that I had become. And I started tracking back the shame that I felt as a boy, where I was a fearful kid who always pushed the fear back and pretended I wasn't afraid in order to be brave enough to earn my father's love, in order to not talk about the things we didn't talk about as boys and men. You know, it's like I did the man in the box thing. So I had this terrible sense of self-esteem that did not make me an alcoholic, but combined with the drink was a ticket to emotional immaturity that kept me in a state of suspended development or suspended, you know, growth in my mind. And I approached the world's problems with a childlike, infantile, reactionary tantrum, you know, response, which was, I totally understand today. I went into San Quentin and knew I was going to die as a convict. Okay, I knew I was going to. Lifers did not get out. There was no lifers ever getting out. The guys, all I knew about prison was what I learned from the guys in jail. And my disease progressed. And what I found in San Quentin was a cauldron of heat. I found a cauldron of ego, man. Of, if you can picture, I know you guys have seen the movies, but it's this place of steel and concrete, you know, reactionary egos, facades, you know, trying to be tough guys. And I was scared to death going in there, man. If I could have just stopped somewhere and cried my heart out, my God, I didn't have it in me, you know, to be that vulnerable ever. And I fit in San Quentin. I fit within that, and Brian fit, man. I had arrived, you know, and participated in the prison politics. Spent 1993, the whole year, in what they call the SHU, the Security Housing Unit, in the hole. They had to separate me from other murderers because I wasn't playing well with other killers. I was hurting other men. You know, I was like, I kept getting worse, man, and I knew I was going to die in prison. And I earned that separation into the hole. So understand, I was not a victim in this thing at all. And that's really important for y'all to hear. Like, full accountability here. I made my bed and I was going to sleep in it. And I knew that I was going to die in prison. A couple of things happened. In 1997, I was about 9.5 years into that life sentence, and had come out of a level 4 New Folsom prison down to a medium security prison. And the guy that got shackled up with me on the bus, a guy named Steve, he was the cook in the cell blocks between 7 and 8 blocks. And Steve he had 27 years to life, man. He was a heavy hitter, but had some stability about him. You know, I was doing this up and down. My peaks and valleys were pretty extreme. Steve had this quiet equilibrium, man, that I didn't know, you know. But when we got on the bus to get out of this level 4, Steve and I were like, man, we made it. We're getting out of here, man. It was almost like getting a parole, because men were getting killed. Like, we were watching the guys we were on the yard with get shot to death by prison guards, stabbed to death by convicts. We were watching the violence, and we felt like we survived it. So when we got to this medium security prison in the Sonora foothills, we were partnered up, man. We were like the Folsom guys who came to this level 3 that was medium security. And we're hanging out together, eating in the morning together, working out on the weight pile together. I know my friend Yvonne understands, because she goes into, I mean, she gets the prison thing. She's been in California prisons where I was at. The camaraderie we had was solid. And something happened, man. In 1997, my sister showed up to the prison visiting room with a brand new baby girl, you know, and my niece, Sarah. And here I am, you know, doing my best life sentence, which meant politicking, hustling, gambling, doing other substances, trafficking, making pruno, selling, you know, doing the whole hustle, man. And my sister hands me this beautiful baby girl, and I'm not prepared. I'm like, this little ball of fat, looked like she had these chunky forearms, like these fat, with like a rubber band was here and here. And, you know, she was her fat thighs and her perfect little feet and her little tiny toenails, man, that were perfect, and her fingers. And I was in awe of this baby. And I didn't know babies. I didn't have any babies that I knew of. Certainly wasn't a father or never held a baby before. And I was struck by this kid, man. And I knew this kid came straight from God. Now, I wrestled with God, you guys. Like, I had this disconnect from God. And I can remember, you know, where the turning point was when I was a boy hiding from my dad. And this is something that I always remember, is that, I don't know if y'all got juniper bushes where you're from, but we got juniper bushes in the Bay Area, and they're prickly as heck. They suck to hide in. Like, you got to really be wanting to hide to dive into a juniper bush and hide, right? Well, I'm in this hidey hole that I made in this juniper bush, hiding from my dad, who's going to whoop my butt again. And I'm looking at the tailpipe of the Buick in the driveway, and it's all covered with soot. And I had this image of my soul being a white, fluffy, cottony thing that was drugged through this exhaust pipe and was stained with sin. The stain, it was soot-covered sin. And I remember as a boy thinking, what's the point? I'm a sinner. I knew that as a kid, that I was hopeless and I was no good, and God left a component out of me, and I was different than my brother and my sister. So when I'm holding this Sarah, this beautiful little baby, I don't get it, man. I don't get what's happening inside of me. And my sister asked me to be the godfather to this kid. And I'm like, are you crazy? Did they shut that gate on your head? Like, I'm a convicted murderer. I'm a lifer. The stigma, I don't know if you can even wrap your head around what that stigma of being a lifer is. I'm a alcoholic, liar, thief, manipulator, everything that goes against godfathering. You know what I mean? Like, not a spiritual person at all. And she's like, no, Brian, you don't get it, man. But it's you. You got to be the guy who has something spiritually to offer this child. And I did not get it. I left the visiting room and I started looking around the yard, and I'm thinking about what's happening with lifers, with other convicts that are with me Christmas after Christmas after, the guys that are with me have been with me for a long time, not the short timers who are going in and out. I'm looking at my homeboys that are going to die in prison with me. And in 1997 in California, in a medium security prison in Jamestown, California, lifers were getting out of prison in one of three ways. They were getting shot to death by prison guards, they were getting stabbed to death by convicts, and they were overdosing on a substance. And any one of those three was possible for me. I could clearly see that the script for Sarah was that her Uncle B got shot to death by a prison guard, got stabbed to death by a convict, or he overdosed in a prison cell. And I knew that that was the paradigm that was setting the stage for everything that was to come for this little girl in her Uncle B. My nieces call me Uncle B. And so I thought, maybe, I don't know what to do, but I got to do something. I show up to the weight pile. This visiting was on Sunday. I show up to the weight pile after breakfast Monday with Steve working out. And he goes, hey, Fowley, where's your head at, man? Get your head in the game, man. Where are you at? Your head's not. And I start telling him what's going on. And he says, man, brother, meet me tomorrow night. Tuesday night was our deal. He said, meet me tomorrow night at the visiting room. I'm going to show you something. And guess where Steve took me? He took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because here in California, we got these crazy people that do this thing called hospitals and institutions. And they bring a meeting in to hopeless drunks like me in a hopeless situation, like being incarcerated or in an institution or in some kind of a hospital. And they bring meetings in. And those people came in to that prison on those Tuesday nights, and Steve had a place to take me. And guess what? Steve was a sober alcoholic who was doing 27 years of life, and I didn't even know it, man. I've been working out with this dude. We came out of Folsom together, had known him for 9 years, and I didn't even know he was a sober drunk, man, but he had one of them big books, right? And so Steve became my sponsor, okay? Now, I know I see some, I want to say, older faces here, some hair colors that are not the youngsters maybe coming in. But if you're a newcomer or fairly new, and you're thinking maybe you don't know if someone's a good compatibility to be a sponsor, or I don't know if we can work well together, or you're thinking about the interview process at meetings. I didn't have nobody else that I knew that was a sober drunk and that had worked the 12 steps. I had Steve, and that was it. And Steve took me through the 12 steps, and my sobriety date is November 9th of 1997, on account of me not doing interviews and me getting to work with Steve like my life depended on it. And Steve took me through the 12 steps, and it took. So I made a commitment to hit every Tuesday night. They had that other fellowship the other Tuesday night. So I had 2 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous a month, if we had four weeks in a month. So I just committed every Tuesday night. I knew where I was going to be if they let these people in, because they're not opening the visiting room for us to go have an AA meeting unless someone showed up, Yvonne, like if you guys ain't coming in, they ain't giving us a place to go. Hey, you guys want to go do AA? Go ahead. They're waiting for people to come say, we're here to do this thing with these guys. We're standing with these guys. We're going in shoulder to shoulder with these guys, and we're going to help them with their recovery. So Steve took me through the 12 steps, and man, I knew I had a problem with God. I was angry. I was like, there was a chick named Patricia who was an HNI lady, and Patricia was on me. She's like, Brian, you got to work these 12 steps. You got to get to work on these 12 steps. You're going to feel better. And I'm like, get away from me, man. Like, give me some room. I'm here. I'm going to do it. Like a year later, I'm in the room and I'm angry, man. And I'm like working the steps and I'm getting beat up and I got emotional issues coming up. And Patricia, we're sitting in a circle because we showed the unity. They said, so we circled up and we knew not to crosstalk. Patricia's little short Native American chick, and so short that her feet didn't touch the ground in our prison visiting room chairs. And she had long black hair and she's sitting over there laughing. And I'm holding the room hostage. I'm like puking. I'm got the book. This isn't working. These steps ain't working. I'm angry. This is going on. It's not fixing this. I'm puking. It's kind of like the Jerry Springer show on the convicts. You're like, oh yeah, Brian's on one. It's the entertainment for the night, right? Well, Patricia is over there across the room from me and she's laughing and she roll back, her hair would flow back and her little feet would swing up, because they don't touch the floor. And I'm like, man, this chick, she's laughing at me, and I called her out. I knew not to crosstalk. We knew how to do a meeting, but I said, yeah, you think that's funny, huh? And you told me these steps would work. You remember that? And I cussed. I said, that's BS, man. You told me I'd feel better, that these steps would work. And she laughed and her hair flew back and her little feet came up. And she said, yeah, you do feel better, Brian. You feel hurt better. You feel fear better. You feel confusion better. You feel, yeah, you got some feelings today, don't you? You working with feeling. And I laughed, man, because I was taking myself so serious. I was so wound up and so tight on doing this thing right, and I was really like, this is serious business. And I had to laugh at myself, man. She was right. I was feeling, and that's what I had. And I hadn't had that. I was like, these emotional knots were being released. And I became a meditator. I didn't know how to meditate, and I knew better than to try to learn how to meditate from a drunk. So I reached out to some monks who were doing a meditation program in Folsom Prison, and they came to Jamestown Prison and set up a meditation program, and they taught us how to meditate. And I hear a lot of drunks in the room say they can't meditate because it's they can't make their mind blank, and it's really, I don't know where they got that, but I don't know where that came from, but whoever said that ought to be punched in the throat. And I'm a nonviolent guy today. I'm taking a vow of nonviolence, but whoever put that out there has really screwed a lot of people up because they buy into that excuse to not meditate. And the 11th step, it's part of the step. It's not like pray or meditate. It's not like do half the step and don't worry about half measures, even though they avail us nothing. Just do half the step and just pray because you can't make your mind blank. 11th step doesn't say that, man. So I don't know how we get away from, leaving that connection, that grounding, that meditation process out of the 11th step. But it's not in my program. And I learned it from monks and I learned how to meditate. And I became a yogi, man, in prison doing life. And I didn't expect to ever get out of prison. My only motivation was to die differently. I wanted to die differently to leave Sarah a different legacy. So when we look at what motivates us to come in, my motivation wasn't the judge or the border parole hearings or ever thinking I was going to get out of prison. I was already hopeless. I was done. But I wanted to die differently and was willing to do something different to try to leave Sarah a different legacy about Uncle B. And I didn't know what it would be, but I did know that I wanted to die differently than one of those three ways I told you guys. And what happened was I learned how to live a life sentence. I became a peaceful man. I became a person who helped other men. I learned how to cultivate other men who were hurting, that cauldron of heat, of hurt men who hurt men, of hurt men who hurt men and didn't know how to deal with. I learned how to work with men on men's work and to do better and to help grow in emotional sobriety, okay? In emotional, like recovery, if I don't have the recovery, the abstinence, I'm never at a place where I can grow emotionally. Like I was stuck in that 14-year-old suspended development state, right? So the freedom that I got from the 12 steps was that I got to grow in ways that I didn't know were possible. And you can picture this in prison where I thought I was stuck, and the illusion of prison of being a confined space is, well, kind of similar to what we just did with COVID. My whole world opened up. I would have never been online with people from, Chris from New Jersey. Like, I've been in England, I've been in Jerusalem, I've been all over the place, man. And it's like, I've been in meetings because of what looked like constriction actually expanded my recovery, and I tied in with people all over the world, And so the illusion of prison being this concrete and steel, man, the prison in my mind was the ticket I got from AA. I got the key to the kingdom in my mind. And like that dude Chuck C wrote that book about a new pair of glasses, like my glasses got changed, man. My lenses got turned inside out. And I started seeing the prison differently. There was one time I can remember I was doing this work with a Buddhist teacher through a book. I had a book from Pema Chodron called The Places That Scare You. And in it, she talked about, anger and wishing people happiness and the root of happiness. And I was exploring everything, man. Like I'm an AA guy who got sober. And then I'm reaching out to grow spiritually. Like I'm trying to feed my void, man. And this lady, this monk, Pema, she's talking about, wouldn't you want to wish the people you love happiness and the root of happiness? Of course I would, man. I pray for my family. I love and then she's all, well, if you got a choice and someone's neutral to you, you don't care either way. Wouldn't you go down the path of wishing them happiness and the root of happiness? Of course I would, man. I would pick that route over anger or resentment. And then she says in the book, and if someone's a real jerk, what would happen if they had happiness and the root of happiness? Do you think that maybe they wouldn't be such a jerk and so hostile? And I'm like, yeah, that would make sense. Like, if I'm happy and I have the root of happiness, wouldn't I not be angry? So I start wishing people happy, even the people I don't like, happiness. And man, I sat in the day room. You guys seen it, the stainless steel tables with the hard stools welded to them. And I'm sitting at the day room table, and the grill gate opens, and it's unlocked, and all these convicts coming in. And I'm going, wish you happiness and root of happiness. Wish you happiness and root of happiness. Wish you happiness and root of happiness. I wish you happiness and root. And I'm bombarding convicts with happiness and the root of happiness because I'm trying to affect an internal change, man. And they probably thought, man, that Fowley's losing his damn mind. Look at the guy sitting there, his mouth's moving. He's not saying nothing, but wow, And what happened was, after a week, I felt differently about all those convicts coming through, even the prison guards. The prison guards I used to fantasize about hurting because they were mean, oppressive. It changed the way I looked at them, man. And I got freedom from that. And to me, that's emotional sobriety, okay? So it's like, I'm working in recovery. I'm working the 12 steps. Steve's holding my feet to the fire, making me make amends on the yard. I never once got to deal with the streets. He's like, you don't have a community out there, Brian. Your community's right here on the yard. And I've been watching you screw this place up for years. You're going to get right here. That guy, Kenny, that you hurt a couple years ago, he's afraid of you. Go make that dude as whole as you possibly can. And we use this thing. It's like a restorative justice approach to the amends process, like making people as whole as I possibly can is my goal. I can't undo what I did, but I want to make people as whole as I possibly can. That's my approach to my amends. And it comes from a restorative justice studying background with some of my graduate studies. I'm probably running really long. Sorry, that's probably like about a half hour. What happened was, I found freedom in prison through the 12 steps. I became a meditator, and I found a God of my understanding. And I put my mind on the things I wanted to move towards. I never once tried to make my mind blank. My monk, my teacher, said, you point your mind at the things you want to move towards. So I recommend love for you. He knew right what I needed. So I started meditating on love, man, on expanding love, on opening my heart. And my mind would go towards love. And when my mind would have other thoughts, fish hooks that would come through, thoughts about what's for dinner or what's not for dinner or whatever, I'd come back to love, man, on the breath. So what I found was the more I started ideating on the things I wanted, the more I felt the things I wanted. And if I was always, as I was previously, ideating on being a victim and how things were not good for me, then I got a lot of things that were not good for me. When I was looking for reasons to be angry, I found a lot of reasons to be angry. But when I started thinking about love and loving on people and looking at good things and gratitude, like we do in our gratitude list, I started experiencing a lot of love and a lot of gratitude. Anyway, in 2011, man, after multiple parole consideration hearings, I never once thought I could get out of prison. I never thought I could get around the crime I committed. And I just need to have you guys hear that I committed a crime. I didn't catch a case, like a cold, like people, mitigate that. I committed a crime. I never thought the parole board would ever get around that, let alone the damage I did in prison, because they had a long record of me doing damage in prison. But after 13 more years of doing time and doing it in recovery, they saw a change, and they saw a pattern of behavior that they said was significant enough that they wanted to release me from prison. And they granted my release, and they kicked me out on February 11th of 2011. And they kicked me out of state prison after serving 22 years and 3 months of my life. And I was 21 when I went in. So, you don't have to be a mathematician to figure I did more than half my life in prison. When I went into prison, I was an emotionally immature, stunted growth emotionally, punk kid who needed to go to prison, and my community needed to send me. And what my community got back on account of Alcoholics Anonymous, not on account of the correctional system, but on account of AA, my community got back a community member who is accountable and sustainable in my community because of AA. So in my opinion, AA should be going down in the books of history as the greatest social movement that this world has ever seen, because we create phenomenal human beings. And not that it's a big deal to put your shopping cart back when you're done, but I put my shopping cart back when I'm done. Not because I'm an ex-convict, but because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I learned to do in AA, is accountability for the things I borrow, I put them back, right? Like that kind of level of detail happens when alcoholics get sober. You get what I'm saying? So I'm going to tell you just a quick story and I'll wrap it up, man. But one of the things that happened to me was in 1988, I was the cause of a 911 call of a gunshot victim. And in 1988 and 89, when I went through my trial, my conviction into prison, I never once considered who responded to that call, but sheriffs, firefighters, and paramedics showed up to that crime scene. And I never considered the trauma that I put those people through. And when I moved up here about 6 years ago, I bought this place in North Fork. I'm in a rural community, and I go to the Christmas bazaars, and there are a bunch of little old ladies selling jams and knitted stuff and crafts, and it's really a cool community thing. And I buy volunteer firefighter t-shirts to support the volunteer firefighters. And I'm buying a t-shirt, and this guy steps out, and he says, "Hey, man, if you really want to help us, why don't you come work with me?" And I go, "Work with you? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I'm the fire captain here, and I need help. It's just me here, and I need help." Well, man, I can't do that. I turn to my wife, and I'm a convicted murderer. There's no way I could be in a position of trust. I mean, that's absolutely not in the realm of possibility. No way they could ever do that. And he says, I didn't tell him that. I didn't tell him who I was or where I had been. But he says, "I really need the help." And I left there telling him no. And on the way out, my wife says, "Hey, man, since when are you telling people no instead of God letting you say no? Like, why don't you say yes and let God say no? You don't know what's going to happen. Who are you, man? What's going on with you? All of a sudden you're running this thing?" And I always say, "God's got it. Buckle up." I always say that, right? And she calls me out on it. She's good at calling me on my BS. So anyway, I say yes. And I go through this academy, this every Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours a day, Monday nights for 4. And I go through this process in the back of my mind to be a firefighter and a first responder. And I know as soon as the paperwork comes, they're going to ask the question about felonies, and they're going to shoot me down and kick me out. At every step of the way, man, the paperwork came, and Emerson, I love seeing your head nod, brother. You get it. They never asked a question, man. I went through the whole damn thing, and I became a firefighter. And they gave me a badge, man. And it's not some tin nickel badge. It's a weight. I cried, man, when they pinned me. I cried, because it's like it had weight, it had significance, it had healing, it had responsibility, it had trust, it had community member, it had showing up for people on their worst day, And I caused people to show up on a very bad day. And I get to do that. They taught me how to drive their fire engines, respond to medical calls. I could not have fathomed that would be possible when I came in to take the 12 steps to die differently. my point is, if anybody's thinking, you think you know where this thing's going, buckle up, man. God's got it. Okay. On emotional sobriety, all I can tell you is I got the ability to get pretty squirrely pretty fast in my head. I don't have a desire to drink today. I believe that is not an issue for me today. But if I'm not checking in with God and I'm not checking in with my sponsor, I'm not accountable to the men I tie in with regularly, I can get squirrely left on my own. I'm an overpaid, satisfied customer of Alcoholics Anonymous by way of the 12 steps. I'm not overpaid in mythology. I don't buy into meeting makers make it. I had one meeting of AA every other week, but I had a big book in the 12 steps and I had Steve. The big book has the 12 steps, the first 164 pages, and a sponsor who's worked the 12 steps took me through it, gave me a sobriety date, and I have kept it because I worked the 12 steps. So that's kind of just my lecture. I'm not going to beat anybody, like, hey man, I'm a book guy and the book worked for me in a concrete box. If you got people to tie into, if you got COVID as a problem and you got internet, like, man, there's a bunch of, how many, 66 people on here, man, alcoholics just like me, ready to show up for me asking for help. I don't buy it, man. That's not a lockdown. COVID is not a lockdown. I know what a lockdown is. It's not COVID. A big book and Steve, man, and I'm a satisfied customer. So if you're new or fairly new and you're wondering, man, is this thing for me? I had an old timer say, come all the way in, sit all the way down and stay. You don't got to go through it no more, man. Just stay. It's been easier for me to stay. And I tell you, you can look in my eyes, you can feel the authenticity in my voice. I'm a product of Alcoholics Anonymous. The fact that I'm sitting here after an 8-hour day, I'm looking at the Sierras. My babies are going to go down the lake with me here in a little bit and swim in the lake. My boys are 5. I got twin boys who are 5, little redheads, and my daughter's 6. First day of school, guess who was crying the whole damn time? Me. My kids went to school. I've been homeschooling them. Bring them to school. I'm crying, man. Like, the emotional sobriety of being able to show up for my community as a first responder from the guy who caused the call. You get what I'm saying? The difference is pretty vast, and it's a big schism that the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 steps bridged just like that. Simple, man. It's a simple program, only requires my best effort, man. That was it, and my best was good enough. So sorry guys for talking so long. My name's Brian and I'm an alcoholic. Chris, thanks for having me. Juanita, thanks for throwing my name in the hat. I appreciate you. Yvonne, my friend Yvonne on here. I met Yvonne at California State Prison Solano, which I go into now every Tuesday night, which is the prison I paroled from, guys. I go into AA, carry AA into Solano, the prison I paroled from, every Tuesday night and work with the guys I left behind. That's another God shot. There's a bunch of them, man. So I'll shut up. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you all for being here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, Brian. Thank you. My goodness. You got 40 more minutes if you want it. I could listen to you all night. The tradition of this meeting is that if you have a couple friends here or folks that you'd like to just call on, pick 2 or 3 and hear from them, and then I'll open it up for anyone to raise their hand.
Oh, awesome. I love that. I got to say, Juanita, since you threw my name in the hat, I'm gonna ask you to share, and then if we could get Yvonne after that, that would be awesome for me. Yes, don't shake your head, no, dear.
I'm going to assume that you can.
I can hear you, Juanita. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Brian, I remember when Yvonne was trying to get you on Al-Anon Without Borders, and I heard you on Al-Anon Without Borders, and you blew me away. And of course, we'll hear from Yvonne in a little bit, and she sings your praises, and of course, anybody who's heard you tonight can understand why. And what a message. I really appreciate your message. You said something that really got me, where you said, it's not better, it's not getting better. And I think Patricia, was it Patricia who said, it is better. You feel better, everything's, you feel lousy better, all that stuff. And I think the longer that we're in here and doing this stuff and really being as present as we can possibly be, those feelings are so much deeper and we feel them so much stronger. And I just loved your message. I really loved your message. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juanita. Thanks. Yvonne?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yvonne. Brian, thank you so much. You know, I laugh when everybody's sitting seriously, because sitting in prison for 10 years, 3 times a week, you sort of kind of live there halfway. And and for me to go into state prisons and to hear Brian, one of the ones that said it, is like, you know what? I found a freedom that these walls can't keep me in. And I'm thinking, I live on the outside. I want that kind of freedom. This guy is inside. What the hell is wrong with my program? Why don't I have the mental freedom? I'm still concerned about people, places, and things, what they think and what I want to do. And I get high of some anger and some adrenaline, my drug of choice in Al-Anon. And I'm thinking, this guy works a program with almost nothing. I can have access to all the meetings, all the books, all the people. I can go wherever I want. And I don't have that kind of freedom. And that peed me off. And I've heard it from more than just Brian. But he was the first one who said it from the podium. I'm like, what the hell? And I remember when he was speaking in Fresno and AA almost barged into the room with Al-Anon. Well, you know, I was quite surprised. I'm like, oh, you guys lost? And he goes, no, you got to go see Brian. I'm like, oh, okay. And, you know, I walk up and I think, he doesn't know me. He doesn't remember me. And I said, can I give you a hug? Thank you for your service. And he goes, sure. And he whispers in my ear and he says, yeah, you can do that here. We're not in Solano. And I just like, whoa, you remember me? And he goes, well, you're a 6 foot tall blonde. You come every Sunday. He said, how can we miss that? He said, back then they didn't even have conjugal visits. That was a no-no in California. He goes, yeah, I remember you. I'm like, oh, because if when Al-Anon got canceled, I would go in the AA room because I didn't want to go out and come back in and get through the metal detectors and do all that stuff. So that's how I got to know Brian, by sitting in the AA meetings and asking for permission to be in there and quietly in the background and listen. And you know, my emotional sobriety is not to get high on feelings and not to get hung up on the feeling good, whatever that meant, whether it was shopping, after pills and alcohol. Anything in this world is available to me if it makes me feel better. Anything. Just those 2 things don't do it for me. If I would have done it, I would have probably done that. But I'll take whatever. And I had to go into the state prisons for 10 years to take this girl out of the prison of her mind. That's where I found my freedom, with sitting with those guys, listening to their stories. And the one thing that I knew in there is that, number one day I had to talk. I was alone in a room with all these guys. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to do. I have no experience. And one of them said, we've been watching you for the last 3 months. You're 100. I'm like, 100 what? He said, you're 100. He said, you keep it real. I'm like, is that what you want? I'm like, fine, I can do that. I can uncensor myself. And I knew that they could read me. They knew if my eyelash was crooked. So I'm like, you know what? I'll better do some honesty here and I'll better be me. And so I learned how to be me, and they loved me until I was able to love myself. But my honesty and my realness gave me the emotional sobriety and the recovery. And to hear somebody say to me, like, thank you for giving me a language so I was able to go to the board of parole. Without that and without this program, I would have not been able to do this. Thank you for what you share. And I never thought I had anything important to say. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm making a difference here. Wow, because service goes 2 ways. So Brian, love that you go back to Solano, and we'll hook up when I get back to California. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks, Yvonne. Brian, is there anyone else? I got a few folks here with their hands up. Anyone else you want to hear from first?
I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to jump in. It's all yours. Yeah.
All right. We got Joanna, Emerson, and Danny. Joanna, how are you?
I'm good. My name is Joanna. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also part of Al-Anon and CODA. I figured I needed all the help I could get, so I jumped into all 3. But anyway, wait a second. who's chairing? Brian. Thank you so much for your chair. I loved your message. It was very inspirational. And I really like that you said what you said about the thing about better. We feel everything better. Our fear, our anger, everything better. I thought that was great. I also really liked what you had to say about step 11, because I've been saying this for a long time and I've been in the program for a long time, that it's an and there. It doesn't say sought through prayer or meditation and you have a choice. It says prayer and meditation. It also doesn't say prayer and contemplation. Contemplation is a fine practice and it has a good solid practice in actually Christianity and AA. You know, all the little things we read, that's contemplation. And that's fine. It's inspirational, but it's not step 11. It's just not step 11. Step 11 is prayer and meditation, not contemplation. And so I really like that you made that distinction, because I haven't heard it very much and I think it's important, but who am I to know? Anyways, I really like your chair. Thank you for sharing. It was, you said, well, I don't have qualifications for emotional sobriety. Hell, you do. Don't sell yourself short, because you absolutely do. And we all can use your example. So thank you for your chair.
Thank you, Joanna. Emerson, good to see you.
Hey, good to see everybody. Brian, my man, my brother. Hey, I've been to the same prisons you have. I've been to San Quentin, Susanville, Folsom, Jamestown, the whole 9 yards. I know what West Hall feels like. I wanted to read something real quick, and this is you and me. It's right here. It said, you would suppose that men in the fourth classification would be quite hopeless, but that's not so. Many of Alcoholics Anonymous were like that. Everybody had given up on them. Defeat seemed certain. Yet often such men had spectacular and powerful recoveries. And that's what AA has done for me. Evidently, that's what it's done for you. And, AA is alive in the prison system. I have in my book, the cover, this is made by men in Angola State Penitentiary. And you could, the guy's hands are on the bars. These are guys that are never getting out. And the lady that sells them, all of the proceeds go back to the men so they can continue doing AA in there and stuff and printing or making these.
She's got a great message, I think.
And, you're right. If I had sold myself, I was selling myself short, just like you. Things just happen. Now you're a fireman. How does a guy like me, a 3-time loser, I forget how many felonies I have. I work in the ER of a hospital in Long Beach. I work in the ER, dude. Doctors come to me, hey, what should we do with this patient? I work next to a drug cabinet. Where the hell was that when I was using? I mean, it's like I'm a trusted person, brother. They love me, I love them, and I'm of service. Basically, my job is like the picture of Bill and Bob talking to alcoholic number 3 in bed. I meet people at their worst. I try and get them interested in treatment, medication-assisted treatment, talk to the doctors about, well, we need to give this guy that. Let's see if we can keep him for a few days. I mean, they ask me they want me to consult with them. Now that's the power of God. I couldn't have dreamed that. I couldn't have imagined it. When I was sitting in San Quentin watching the Pelicans fight over food, I could have never imagined that I would be in this position that I am now. And it also says, I think on page 114, the power of God goes deep. I could have never imagined, I'm sure just like you, that when you were sitting in that prison cell, wherever it was, that you would be where you are now with your family. Just last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I went scuba diving in Catalina. Last week, I drove up to Sacramento to see my daughter and grandson. My daughter told me she recently went through a divorce, and she's like, Dad, I need you to like be his father. I need you to like handle that. You need to like help raise this boy to be a man. That's I've come a pretty long way from being a crackhead, writing bad checks, doing all that stuff, to being asked to help raise my daughter's son to be a man. So anyway, Brian, thank you. Loved your message. It was powerful, it was emotional, and God bless, brother.
Thank you, Emerson. Thanks. Danny, you're on deck. And if anyone else would like to share, raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm Danny, alcoholic. Good morning from Bali, Indonesia, Friday morning here. It's been a while since I've been able to get to this meeting due to work, and today I took the day off. And it's been so long, I have to ask Sam for the Zoom link again. And he said, it's going to be awesome. Thank you, Brian, for your share. It was. I just have two questions, if it's appropriate. One is, how is your niece, Maria? I mean, she's an angel, obviously. How is she doing, and how are you, how's that going with you and her and your relationship as a godfather? And secondly, if you don't mind, if it's appropriate, to share on your amends process with the family of the guy that you murdered.
Absolutely. Is this okay, Chris? Does that work for you?
This is great. These are questions that were going on in my mind, so I think we'd all love to hear it. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, and I'm open. If anybody's got anything on your mind, like I'm an open book, so feel free. You're not going to offend me on anything. Just bring it, and I'll be glad to share with you. So first of all, with Sarah, her name is Sarah. No, it's okay. But she has gone down a trajectory that's not as close as I would like to. But I'll tell you what, I show up with every sobriety milestone, a little credit to her. And I don't get a response today, but she's young and busy, and I understand that. I have, however, even though I wish that was different, I am so present with my children that I'm like, it's an amazing. And so I don't know if it's not quite the fit, but what I'm saying is that the quality of father that I get to be with my children, of one who talks, of letting them know they're loved no matter what, of all the things that like I think today that I should have had, or I would have liked to have had, maybe not should have, but man, my kids are the recipients of some pretty awesome fatherhood. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm immature enough, that I have a lot of fun. Like my wife has to check me. I mean, there's a lot of things happening around here, motorcycles and zip lines and a lot of stuff. It's maybe more for me than the kids. But with the amends process with the family of Jim, I have never been able to have direct contact. The only contact that I've had was in the board of parole hearings. And the first time I went to the parole board, the prison guard told me, don't look at the family. And it was the ex-wife and the son. And don't talk to them. I'm going to sit right behind you. I'm going to put you on the ground if you look at them or talk to them. Don't say nothing to them. And you're looking straight at the board man. Very controlled, very, confining, very controlled. And man, brother, I'm sober, right? I don't know if I'm ever going to have a chance to say anything. As soon as I got the chance, I turned and said, I have to tell you that I am so sorry for the impact that I've had. And I can't even, and I did it. The guy didn't do shit. He didn't take me down. He didn't throw me on the ground. He didn't step on my neck. He didn't do, and I did the best that I could with what I could, because I didn't know that I'd ever have that chance. And the thing with me and parole hearings was that I always wanted to speak my truth, even against my lawyer's suggestion at one hearing to not discuss things any further, that I've already talked about everything enough. Like maybe my fourth or fifth hearing in, she said, Brian, don't talk about it no more. Let's just do the formalities. I said, are you crazy, man? I gotta speak my truth. I'm accountable. I'm coming to the table, man. I'm bringing it. They can ask anything and I'm going to answer anything. And I always did that. And a couple of things with the men's. Jim had two boys, and Jim was had a substance abuse problem that took him away from his family. And his ex-wife said that in one of my hearings, that she lost Jim long before I took his life. But those boys were left. Listen, if I looked at me in 1988 walking into San Quentin, I would have bet money against me changing. I would have bet against me. And the miracle of AA is that I came out the other side of that. I would have lost money on me. I don't know that Jim wouldn't have turned the corner. I don't know that he couldn't have got the ticket, but I robbed him of the opportunity. I robbed him of the chance to get the ticket. You get what I'm saying? Like, we never know, man. And so I've always tried to creatively do things. One of the things I did, like for kids, is there's two things I'm going to tell you real quick. Thank you, Kimberly. I see you there, man. I'll be quick with these two stories. Like, I knew I had to do things for kids, right? So I killed a man, but he had kids, right? So like when they took the like black clothing, Emerson, out of prisons in the 90s, I took and gathered all the black clothing from the homeboys, from the cell blocks, and me and my partners in recovery are washing clothes. We're drying them on clotheslines in the prison cell block. We got fans blowing on them, and we package them up and we send them to the Tuolumne County District Attorney Victim Assistant office. And we tell them, here's some clothes, maybe for some homeless youth, some fringe youth. If you can put these somewhere, they've all been washed. I'm sure you'll wash them again, but please accept this gift for kids, right? And then that was one way for me to participate in something that I didn't know wasn't a direct amends to his children, but something I could do for kids, man. So the next thing I did was I started looking at the county. Like, I had met my wife, she was from Fresno, and I started looking at programs in the area. And she sent me a list of kids for youth, programs for youth. And I got a hold of an Economics Opportunity Commission program that took care of homeless youth. They had something called the Sanctuary Outreach to the Streets. So I hit my partners up and I go to the canteen, and we get things like toothpaste, soap, we get candy bars, we get top ramens, we get tuna fish. And I send this package with a canteen list to the Sanctuary Outreach to the Streets in Fresno. And I say, I don't know if you can use this stuff for any kids, but if you are interested in anything on this canteen list, if you fill this out and send it back to me, I will put a package together and send you something at least every other month. And this lady who ran the program, her name's Jody Ketcheside. Jody writes me back, says, oh my God, here's what the things we need for these kids. And this is awesome. Thank you so much. I get the list. I start sending packages. My partners on the yard, we start hitting every cell block. This was at California State Prison, Solano. And we start hitting the cell blocks, and dudes are kicking in. And we're going asking convicts who don't have, they're not making big money. We're asking them for canteen items to give, to send to somebody on the streets. And the guys that were cracked open, they're like, here, man, what else you want? Give me a list for next month. Give me $20 next month. Me and my partners will split. We started hitting crews, man. So we send this stuff, and I'm paying the postage on the box. Nothing goes out of the prison without being paid for by postage, right? So I'm carrying the burden of the weight, the postage of a canteen box. I got to tell you, I started working and receiving and release, and my prison guard boss would give me the extra lunches that didn't go to the convicts on the bus or the guys going out. And I start taking peanut butter and jelly that's packaged in a way that it lasts, and cookies that are packaged. I start throwing boxes of this canteen, this stuff from the prison kitchen in these boxes, and I'm shipping it. And next thing I know, the prison guard who's my boss tells me, Brian, he used to call me Whiz Kid. He said, Whiz Kid, he said, you quit paying for that postage. We're going to let California State Prison Solano pay for that postage. You bring those damn boxes to me, and I'm going to ship those things out for you. Next thing I know, I got this guy paying the postage, which means I freed up $30 that I can buy more stuff for the kids. It turns into this thing that we're doing with these convicts, sending stuff to kids. Jody, who I met, Jody, in like 2003, when I paroled in 2011, this is going to blow your freaking mind. I paroled in 2011. I tie in with Jody at the Fresno Economics Commission, Opportunities Commission, and she gives me a spot in transitional livings to do workshops with youth. And they're youth who have transitioned out of the foster care system, 18 to 24-year-olds that are living in their transitional living. They get credit for workshops, and she gives me a credit giving workshop, and I'm doing life skills on the street. These are tough kids, man. And their parents, their uncle, their dads are gone. They're either dope fiends or in the joint. You know, uncles are in the joint. These guys, Fresno's a tough place, man. So the kids I'm working with are amazing kids they just got circumstances that are tough. Me and Jody worked together for years. And in 2000, and it was probably 15, maybe 16. No, it was probably 16. No, 17. At any rate, Jody calls me one day and says, Brian, I don't know why, but I gotta talk to you, man. Her ex-husband was murdered. And she tells me, I gotta talk to you. And I ask her what's going on. She tells me this guy was murdered, her ex-husband and her kids. She's got 2 kids with this guy. He's involved. Like, they're still family. They just don't have a marriage. You know what I mean? So the dude's part of the family, and he was murdered. Man, brother, I went through every court hearing. I showed up with Jody in the victim's side of the courtroom. No one knew who I was. Her family, her dad, no one knew who I was to Jody but a friend. And I went through every hearing with her. And when the guy was found guilty and sentenced, I knew what he felt like. I knew what the family on his side of the courtroom felt like. My family was there. I had never been on the victim's side of that. So think about the healing that was happening for me to experience the empathy of being on that side of the courtroom. And check this out. So he goes to prison. A couple years later, maybe 3 years later, she tells me, Brian, I want to go talk to him. Now, I'm in a master's program, graduate studies in peacemaking and conflict studies, and I'm working with mediation. So I'm at Fresno Pacific University working on my master's degree. I had gotten my bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration with a human services focus, right? I love school, didn't know what to do, but I knew a lot about prison. So I took a criminal CJ, right? I got a bachelor's of science in criminal justice. And so I know about mediation and this victim offender dialogue stuff that I'm working with in my graduate studies. Man, I went into Norco prison with Jody, and we sat at the table with the man who murdered her husband, and I helped facilitate a dialogue that I watched him heal, and I watched Jody get the answers that she didn't get from our adversarial court system, which separates the criminal from the victim and does not let them talk at all through the whole process. And the healing that Jody got was like, man, I got a tape of driving back. I tape recorded us driving back because we knew we'd write it someday. It's such an awesome story. And so that's another way that I'm making them, like, does that make sense? Like, I don't believe in living amends. I don't believe that. What I'm saying is I don't believe in me staying sober is any amends to Jim or the crime that I committed or anybody that I've ever harmed. It's only the next right thing. Living sober is right, man. That doesn't fix nothing. But the fact that I show up accountable to the next level is, and I have to show up every day. And God puts these things in my, how do I get there, Danny? How can I get there? I couldn't have even thought of that possibility that would ever happen. Jody, from that connection from prison to sending stuff to homeless kids into a prison where I'm her advocate. I mean, man, dude. So I hope that gives you some insight, but the stories are like, it's incredible, man. It's a God shot, you know, like God's got it. Buckle up, man, because he's writing the script, man.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Charles, if you're still on here, I saw you with your hand up. Charles, you still here? I think he might have had to jump off. Anyone else like to respond or ask?
I talked too long. They got tired of waiting. I'm sorry. That sucks.
Not at all. Please don't think that. We'd love to hear from some of the rest of you. Raise your hand. All right, Valerie, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for everything. I've just heard buried life. I'm an Al-Anon member, and I've been looking at the buried life where I've come from, the over responsibility, the madness, missing in action, all the fear and all the isms in the family. Everyone had a role, you know, no trust, nothing absolutely missing in action, the whole lot of us, all 7 of us. And coming through that system, no education, just brought up, no mum and dad anyway, heavy gambler. My father had no food, no nothing. I cannot believe where I am today coming from that, because he had a plan, yes, because he has done for me what I've not done for myself. He has carried me through. He really has. And the situation, places, things I've met in my husband's, they've been there for a reason to carry on, and I'm still here. So yeah, I've dealt with a buried life, and I have a gift, and I won't be returning it. I'll stay here, because when I look at that, because I can be taken hostage, I can be a volunteer hostage. I can fix and control and manage and think I know everything. High ego, low self-esteem, go hand in hand, running up the road. And I'm still listening and learning. And I've got to stay here for my next generation, coming through the isms of the family, the generational sickness. And got a great grandmother now, and I need to be here. And this is how I can help them to carry the message to this illness, which is still going around the family. 5 to 6 people involved. I can be the only one here, but I can have all them involved with me to staying in the meeting. So thanks. Yeah, good. Yeah. I'm not in love with years. I just count the day. That's all I have today. Yeah. So thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Valerie. Cynthia, thanks for putting your hand up. I'd love to hear from you.
I'm an alcoholic. My name is Cynthia. I'm so grateful to be here among you in this Zoom meeting. And Brian, thank you so much for your share. It was very touching. God, Zoom is such an amazing tool and really a gift of the pandemic, along with, having groceries delivered, which, I hate grocery shopping, so that's cool too. But anyway, I was, when you're not sure if you're in the right place, I was, this is the very first time I've joined into this meeting. My friend Tom sent me the link. Hi, Juanita. I was born in Fresno. It is a little bit ghetto. My mom moved us out of there when I was 7. I grew up to be an alcoholic, came out the other side, because of my higher power and, meetings and a sponsor and just the grace of God, and became a nurse. I'm a nurse as well. Also in a trusted position, thinking to myself, working in the same town where I caused so much damage, and thinking, this is going to be so weird when they start bringing my friends in, you know what I mean, with long-term disease. I mean, God forbid, but I thought these people are going to want to run the other way. They're going to ask for a different nurse, Actually was looking for service commitments, but having relocated here to Houston Conroe, and reintegrating into the program because, for me, life got really good. I went to school as well, and I have 2 sets of twins, and didn't have any room in my life for meetings. It's when I needed them the most, I feel like, though, and I really just didn't make time, and I suffered because of it. So I started to feel my life getting kind of dirty again, and came back to the rooms because luckily my feet are smarter than my head, So I started looking for service commitments. This gentleman talked about how he was serving a life sentence and got sober in prison, and now he's out, and he takes meetings back into the prison. And so I just signed up for the Southeast Texas Area Corrections Facilities Conference to go in and learn to find out how I can possibly fit into my life, carrying the message to our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. Everything about what just happened now today at this meeting says to me, I'm on the beam. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I can't wait. I want what you have. And I can't wait to see where this takes me. It was very touching, and I'm so moved right now. Thank you so much. I'm alcoholic. My name is Cynthia.
Thank you, Cynthia. That's, I love these connections. Kimberly, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Kimberly and I'm an alcoholic. Brian, thank you so much for your share. I have been sober since 2013, and I don't think I've ever heard the amends process talked about the way you discussed it as making whole. And if you had a few minutes to elaborate a little further on that, I know you just sort of discussed part of this, the living amends isn't the thing that I have sort of been taught. And I'm curious, I'm really grateful for this meeting. I super needed it today. But yes, I'm going to sit down now finally and listen in. Thank you for, if you can elaborate just a titch. I know we don't have a lot of time.
No, sure. Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate you coming back because I thought I lost you. I thought you got tired of waiting for me. So thanks for coming back with that. So for me, making things whole as we possibly can is a restorative justice idea that I learned in a program in prison that was not AA, but it was used by Steve in kind of accordance with a victim, I'd say, not really a victim awareness class, but a class where I was able to work with a victim of a similar crime and how she was looking to be made whole. And that's where I got the idea that, man, this thing has to work in a different way than just trying to fix what I did. So in restoring to justice, like, in restorative justice, it's like with a guy named Kenny who I talked about in prison who I had harmed. He was like, you got to go make that dude as whole as you possibly can. It meant that I had to earn his trust back. It wasn't about, apologizing and not recommitting the offense, but I actually befriended him and asked him after some time of, it took a process. It wasn't a one-time thing. And then that was off my book, if that makes sense. Like my amends have to ease into them. So in making Kenny whole, where I had scared him with violence, I didn't physically hurt him, but I intimidated him. I had to first apologize and ask him permission to talk to him. Does that make sense? Like I had to ease into it, and then I had to work to say hi and check in and make sure I got eye contact. And he got used to me slowly working my way in. And then it got to us having a couple brief conversations. We got to bought him an ice cream at the canteen one day and just walked by and said, and he was just like, really? And like, he took it, but it's like I had to make him. So for my thinking on Kenny, how do I make him whole? I make him unafraid of me. I make him feel like I'm not a threat. And to go a step further, I wanted to befriend him. I wanted to make him my friend. And Kenny died in prison. And Kenny became my friend. And Kenny taught me how to play guitar. And we started off on a really bad foot, man. I've never been a good guitar player, but Kenny patiently showed me how to make myself feel good by playing. You know what I'm saying? Like it was something that just changed the way I felt. So that's an example of trying to make Kenny as whole as I possibly could. Kenny never got out, and he was a 3-striker, man. That poor guy should have, in my opinion, been in prison, and he ended up, dying in prison of Hep C, liver failure, and which is an alcoholic disease, man. We kill our livers. So does that help with how to ease into and make it not just for what I had done, but a bigger picture of wholeness and what I see as a human being and making them whole, which is to love them and befriend them and hopefully have them look at me with love and friendship after I'd harmed them.
Thank you.
That's really, really helpful. I love this, Brian, because we call this a workshop. And this feels very workshop-like, your willingness to answer some of these questions. So thank you so much. I think we have a minute for one more person. If there's anyone else who wants to just respond, ask a question, or just share before we close, we'd love to hear from one more person. Yeah, Abigail, do I see a hand? Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for your share. It was really powerful. I don't have a lot of words for it. It was just big. And I didn't want to share tonight. I don't even know what I have to say, except I got that feeling where the palms are sweating and my stomach feels weird. I just basically want to thank the entire meeting. I just went on vacation and I missed last Thursday. It's the first one I've missed in probably 4 months. And I had an incident that was very uncomfortable. And it was with my son-in-law, and it's been sort of an ongoing problem. And man, we resolved something. It was incredible healing. And it happened through prayer. It happened through working the steps. It happened through my sitting down and doing a 4th step while I was feeling hama and saying prayers, and I was able to pause. And he made an amends with me that allowed me to feel whole. And these little like strings have been falling off my heart ever since. It's a very small thing, no big deal, but you know, like to feel the difference in my response now versus say 6 or 8 months ago is huge. It's really huge. So I thank you all. This meeting has been incredibly impactful. And Brian, you're an example of that. We don't mess around here in this meeting, and I'm happy to be able to say we. So thank you. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you, Abigail.
Well, friends, we are down to the end of our time here. This has just been such a blessing and so meaningful. Brian, there's a lot of words of gratitude in our chat. I just want to make sure you see that. And I'm going to one more time put in the chat the Dropbox. We're usually about a week or so behind in that Dropbox, but all the talks eventually get posted in there. Brian, do you have any kind of closing thoughts or anything before we end with a prayer?
Just that God's got it. I mean, this thing is so big that just by showing up, and don't drink no matter what, you know, if anybody's struggling, Chris has got my number. I can throw it in the chat if you want, but I'm available to anybody. And if I can't pick up, because I do have a busy life, I will call you back. I promise. I will call back. I'm accountable and dependable. So come all the way in, sit all the way down, and stay, because you can see this is a good ride. That's thanks, Chris.
That's great. Thank you. Well, friends, how we close this meeting is we just take a few moments of silence and go to our inner room, and we say a prayer of a tradition of ours or just a silent prayer, and then we'll come back and thank Brian. So let's take a moment. Amen. All right, Brian, thanks so much for being with us, and everyone, thanks for showing up. Keep showing up.
Thank you, Brian. That was incredible.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Juanita, for that. Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you so much, Brian.